The season of chapped lips is approaching, and if you've never made your own lip balm or chapstick or whatever, then stick around because making your own is so much fun. Hello, I am Robin at Reduce, Reuse, Reimagine. I love sharing about ways to reduce and reuse because I often find that not only does this approach help the environment, it usually also saves money and lets you personalize in a way that you just can't get otherwise. I love making our own lip balm tubes at home. I feel like it reduces packaging and waste. It also gives me more control over which ingredients feel right for us. Some people might have allergic reactions to store-bought ones, or they might worry about the safety of the ingredients. Most of the chapsticks out there have ingredients that I can't pronounce, and they include things like petroleum. So this make it yourself approach is just a simple workaround for all of that. There are countless recipes for homemade lip balms online, and I will share the one that I make on here today. But the best part about this is that you can personalize it and make it your own. So I'm making just a super simple recipe with what I had on hand. A lot of people add things like shea butter or coconut butter or vitamin E. So those things are typically good options of what you can add in there, but I don't think you can go very wrong. Really, I just wanted to introduce the idea and the process for anyone who's never thought about doing this before. One of the parts I love about this is that you can reuse the little tubes. You can either reuse ones that you previously bought at the store, or sometimes natural food stores will sell empty tubes. That is what I ended up getting years ago, simply because we didn't really have any traditional chapstick type tubes around. But once you have these and you've established this, you can just keep reusing the tubes again and again. Since these homemade recipes are made with more natural ingredients, the general online recommendation is to sort of change these out every 6 months or so. Do we do that? But when it is time to make a new batch, I gather the tubes we have and I wind the base all the way up to the top just so I can remove any excess lip balm that is still in there. I sort of just break that off, and then I use something small and sharp to just sort of dig out the rest. We have this sort of reusable toothpick, so I just use that to dig out whatever's left in there. And honestly, after this and a simple wiping down, I really don't feel the need to completely wash these each time. Do what feels right for you, but I don't do that every time. Sometimes I have a label sticker on these just showing when I made them or who's in the house they were. So I just peel this off. I use just a drop or two of orange essential oil, and any excess residue comes right off. And then the really, really important thing is once the tubes look good and clean, you're going to want to twist these and push that base back down to the bottom so they are ready to refill. Sometimes I find that ours can be a little bit finicky and I almost have to push the base as I'm twisting, but it's really not that hard. It's really remembering to do this step. In our house, we usually don't need more than 4 tubes, so that's about what I make for our recipe. I think our recipe makes a little bit more than that just in case. Obviously, you can adjust the amounts of what you're making as needed if you want to have more of these on hand or if you're making these as gifts. I do find that most of the recipes do use beeswax, and you can either buy pellets of beeswax to melt down. Sometimes they sell small bars of beeswax. I usually buy the big pound of beeswax at our local natural food store. I do this because we use beeswax for other projects and other things throughout the year. So I usually just melt the whole bar down, and then I use one of these silicone containers with the little partitions. We happened to find an extra one of these at a thrift shop, and so I just designate this for this purpose. Once the beeswax has cooled completely, I just pop these out and put them in a bag in our freezer. And it's great because I can just take what I need when we're doing a project, whether that's 1 cube or a few cubes, and it's just much more manageable than having the big bar. If you get the pellets, that's obviously a lot more manageable too in terms of weighing them and in terms of getting the exact amount you want. I just prefer the beeswax that comes from the complete bar, but the pellets work just as well. So here is one of those cubes. I don't need the whole thing because I'm only going to use about 2 teaspoons of beeswax for this particular recipe. This weighs 1.6 ounces. I only need about 4/10 of an ounce. I could not cut this without some effort. So what I decided to do was just melt it down until I got the amount that I needed. I got this Pyrex at a thrift shop years ago, and again, I've just designated it for these beeswax crafts. I just use it as sort of a makeshift double boiler. Really, it's only had beeswax in it, but I decided to put this in a pot of some boiling water just to melt it down and kind of give it a little wipe out before beginning this project. And once I thought that the little beeswax cube had melted enough for the 2 teaspoons that I needed, I just removed this from the heat and took out the cube and started measuring out into another small glass bowl. I did not have 2 teaspoons. I only had about 1.5. So I just put everything back on the stovetop for a little bit until I got that 2nd teaspoon that I needed. Then I wanted to add a carrier oil. A lot of people add things like coconut oil or almond oil or olive oil. I decided to just use the sunflower oil that we had on hand, and I added just a generous 2.5 tablespoons of the oil. I sometimes add a bit of honey to this recipe. I usually add it after it's been heated, but I was a bit distracted trying to film this while doing it. So I accidentally added the honey ahead of time, which I don't recommend. I don't think it mixed in as well, but everything was fine. Like I said, I feel like all of this is very forgiving. I'm not an expert on any of these products or the process, but just from my experience, everything seems really, really forgiving. I think I added about half a teaspoon of honey. I think I would add even less next time, maybe a 1/4 teaspoon or just a tiny little bit. The honey is very optional. I don't see it in a lot of recipes, but it's how I initially started making this, and so I've just kind of kept that up throughout the years. It is so fun watching the beeswax in the double boiler and just watching it change consistency from that solid form to liquid. I love that. You can use a spoon to sort of start chopping it up if you want to speed up the process. And the other cool part is my measuring spoon had accumulated a lot of the beeswax that solidified, but just using that same spoon to stir things around will eventually just liquefy that as well. So it's a really easy way to make the cleaning process that much easier. So once this is all melted, I took it off the heat and added just a few drops of essential oil. I like adding orange, but things like lavender would be great too. This is where you can really personalize things. I am not an expert on essential oils, so use your research and judgment for what sounds right. I know that certain essential oils can produce sun sensitivities, so you just want to be aware of that when you're working with essential oils. So I just have all the tubes lined up and ready to go because you do not want this to start cooling and solidify. If it does, you can just reheat it. And again, just making sure that those tubes have been twisted back down so that the base is all the way at the bottom. In retrospect, I usually make this in the actual pourable Pyrex. So this was a little tricky to pour into the tubes. It made a little bit of a mess, but I was able to fill up all 4 tubes. And then the part that spilled and solidified really quickly, I just used a scraper to scrape it off, and I just put it back on the stovetop to remelt it. Because sometimes when I fill these up, there's a little divot that forms as they cool. So I usually just like to top that off once these have cooled just a little bit. I would let them cool completely before actually capping them. And then you can use stickers or labels if you're in a household where you want to differentiate whose is whose. This year we just used stickers. But in the past, I've just used parts of mailing labels to actually write the date that I made these. This time what I did is I just wrote it on our calendar, so I know when I made them and about when I should start to think about switching them out. If you enjoy making these and you start to feel really confident in that, then these can be a really fun gift to give. If you're trying to think of a gift for a lot of people, this can be a fun gift, especially if you personalize the labels. Or maybe you could put together a gift basket of some self-care bathroom items, maybe a basket of salt scrubs and scrunchies and some lip balms. I think that would be really sweet. I think that is all. I was originally going to make this into a shorts video, and I quickly realized I just could not get everything into that 3-minute time limit. I hope this gave you some ideas. Again, I will post what I did for my recipe in the description, but I highly recommend checking out some recipes online because, again, I just kept it really, really basic for this one. I did not have shea butter or coconut butter on hand, so this is a super, super basic recipe, but also that works. So if you don't want to get super complicated with it, then that is a perfectly doable way to do it. Thank you so much for watching. Your actions can and will make a difference. Bye.